People Person, the show where we talk about the human side of work. Today, we're diving into one of the most underrated, underutilized, and frankly misunderstood HR tools, which is exit interviews. Because when people are on their way out, they're often the most honest they've ever been, or we're at least hoping they are. So joining me today is Jaime Petkanics from Grüns, who has actually used exit interviews to create real, measurable change inside an organization and not just collect notes, child, that live in a dusty old Google Doc. So Jaime, I'm so glad that you're here with me today. I have so many questions. As HR folks, we know how important exit interviews are, but I feel like you may have a bit more insight to it. So if you're down for the conversation, I'm down to get started.
Yes, thank you for having me.
Easy. Before we jump into this conversation, let's talk about how putting your people first means putting your people team first too. Intuit QuickBooks Payroll makes it simple. QuickBooks Payroll unifies HR, time tracking, payroll, and accounting with one seamless system. You heard that right, one system. That means no more switching between platforms or juggling tools that don't speak to each other. No new systems, no new logins, and no learning curve. When systems support people, work works better. With automation and smart integrations, QuickBooks Payroll helps you to save time and reduce manual work. Integrations, AI, and automation handle all the heavy lifting. AKA, your team can reduce the time they spend on administrative tasks and focus on what they do best. So learn more at quickbooks.com/workforce. That's quickbooks.com/workforce. Okay, so actually, what is your intro when it comes to opening the floor to an employee about exit interviews? Like, what's your opening spiel to get them comfortable and to set the scene?
Just to step back a little bit, because my thoughts on this topic are a little bit complicated, because I'm hoping that by the time someone is sitting with me in an exit interview conversation, it's not our first conversation. We hopefully have a relationship in place. We have built trust. And ideally, I'm not hearing about any big theme for the first time. An exit interview is great. All feedback is a gift. But ultimately, the most useful feedback is the feedback you get when there's still something you can do about it, right? And you can change that employee's experience in a way that is meaningful enough to change their mind about deciding to leave the company. But from time to time, you do get into that space where someone has decided that there's something better out there for them. And once they get into that conversation, you really want to set the stage for, like, here's what we're here to do, and here's what I would love to get out of this conversation, and here's what I'm going to do with it. Right? No one is going to be honest with you in an exit interview if they know you're going to take the full script and verbatim go repeat it back to their manager, their teammates, the leadership team, right? But obviously, like you said, like, we don't want this feedback just like sitting in a dusty old Google Doc doing absolutely nothing. So actually explaining to people a little bit on the back end of what you do with that feedback and how you relay it will hopefully put someone at ease.
Yeah, no, I love that, especially because I feel like the biggest thing an employee shares about exit interviews is the fear of, this is going to bite me in the beep, 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 beep after I'm gone. Yeah. And so that kind of sways them to go from like being super honest to like, actually, let me just keep this super PC. Let me not share what needs to be actually shared because I want to just keep bridges. I don't want to burn anything. Like, I just want to move forward. Actually, a follow-up question to that. Best practices. Do you believe it's important for an HR professional to share feedback in like a recap? Is it with each exit interview, or do you do it collectively where it's like maybe quarterly that you're sharing it, depending if you are having attrition to a certain degree? Like, what have you seen be the best method of sharing feedback from an exit interview, actually?
The key is looking for themes across different vehicles of feedback, exit interviews being one of them. One-on-ones that I have with members of the team or that the generalists on my team have with the team is another. Our engagement surveys that we do twice a year is another. When I meet with our leadership team and they pass on themes they're hearing from their team, like, that's another. And then the best thing you can do is triangulate that feedback and put it into a format that is usable for change. And that motivates change, right? It's not successful, and it also doesn't build trust to have one exit interview and then take that back to a leader or to your CEO and say, like, here's what I learned in this exit interview. Because it's so easy to say, well, that's just one person's individual experience, so everyone else seems to be fine on that topic, right? But if you take a whole quarter to gather the themes and triangulate the feedback, then you can say, okay, this was just one person's individual experience. And not every company is right for every person and the culture and the values and the way the company operates. And so that might be an individual experience. But oftentimes what I have learned in exit interviews is thematic, and it does align with other things that I've heard.
Okay, I love that. And that's not to say that speaks to instances perhaps in an exit interview that you will hear maybe an employee, that's when they're sharing maybe like an incident that might have happened at work that would require you to maybe then say, hey, we need to do some investigative work or just any specific instances like that. You're saying outside of like those situations, this is where we can take the thematic route.
100%. If someone brings something to me in an exit interview that is problematic or illegal or
Mercy.
toxic in any way, like that probably has to be addressed head on in a different way. And candidly, exit interviews are not a large part of my job right now. I've been, exactly. I'm so grateful because it's so much more fun and interesting and high impact to focus on the feedback further upstream. I've been with the company almost a year and a half. We've only had 2 resignations.
It's amazing.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
And I'm so grateful. I'm so happy. The team is so happy. So it's not a big part of my job right now, but I apply the principles that I would use in an exit interview to other conversations and other forums where we gather feedback and react to it with as much seriousness as if someone was leaving, as if, if turnover was higher than it is, because I think that's how you prevent that turnover from happening.
No, super smart. And so back to what you were saying, you're seeing that in like the pulse surveys, your engagement surveys, your one-on-ones, I think is somewhere that you mentioned as well. So it sounds like there's a bit of coaching as an HR person that you're giving to your talent of like how to broach those topics so that we don't get to that part of an exit interview.
Totally.
Yeah, well, as the Chief People Officer at Grüns, like what is the thing that you do, whether it's by example or by advising your executive team, that shows up in your culture? Because that sounds like culture. Like that's the thing that's supporting the values of like having the safe space to speak, having respectful candor and like feedback. Like what is the things that you believe are the importance of like having in your culture that allows that to exist when it comes to feedback?
I think it's so important how people respond to feedback.
Yeah.
Right? Someone will walk into a meeting so energized with an idea or something to share. And if they get shot down, whether it's an idea or feedback, or if someone responds either like shutting them down or defensively, maybe you get 1 or 2 more times where someone bothers to show up with that energy, but not too many more times than that. And then, in hiring and onboarding both, one question I ask in almost all of my interviews is, when's the last time you had to give somebody really difficult feedback? And I try to get a sense of the level of comfort that that person has with being direct, especially when it's hard. Someone who has developed that muscle can speak about it really freely. They can give me tons of examples. They're not uncomfortable with the question. And that person will be successful in our culture that values directness as long as it comes from a solution-oriented place. And I look for that too in the answer, right? When you're giving feedback, is it more of a vent or is it aiming to assist, aiming to make it better?
I love that. I have to steal that low-key because the question I also ask in interviews is a version of that where it's, when's the last time you have received feedback that you may have disagreed with, and how did you handle that scenario and what was your action steps? And I found that like, one, it kind of throws people off. We're like, oh, that I didn't agree with. Mm-hmm. But to your point, it's really important to see how you receive that feedback. And do you internalize it, let it fester and go to a route that maybe is not beneficial to both you or the business? Or do you just find confidence in yourself to approach the situation, and whether you correct or you speak up for yourself? Like I'm always curious to see what people's like reactions are to situations like that. And that feels like that question is a cousin of your question, and that's really good to see in real time.
Yeah.
Especially if
I like yours too.
Well, speaking of questions, because I'm a little nosy, which is why I'm in HR. But what is a question that you sometimes really want to ask in an exit interview, or to your theme of like, hey, maybe not just exits, but feedback in general? Mm-hmm. That you really want to ask, but like professionally, you're like, ugh, I really can't get there. But that question could give a lot of insight if you were able to like tactfully bring it up.
Like, I can't ask this, but what I would really want to know is like everyone has that like work best friend that they go to and they vent to after a tough day. Or maybe you bring it home to your spouse or your partner or your friend or your mom. I want to know when you're venting to that person, what is like the raw feed of that, right?
Yes.
Because maybe it's not productive, but it would get at the core of what is bothering
to
you.
Who? You know, because I think we can get some good information from that based on what you're saying.
Yes.
Like the rawest information and feedback, you're getting all the details, and then it's going to be then you as the HR person or whoever's on the receiving end to parse through it and be like, okay, that's factual. Or maybe that's not factual, but that's still information I still want to know. Like that's no holds barred, like unfiltered, you know?
Totally. Like what happens when you remove the filter that you're talking to me?
Yes.
What would you say? Like what is the core truth of this thing? And that doesn't mean you can't make it productive. It doesn't mean you can't understand why something might be the way it is, right? And assume positive intent. Like I know this is probably happening because the company is growing so fast, but it's like really annoying when, right? And so I think you can do both, but I'd love the raw feed of that as a supplement to a more productive forward-facing conversation that we might be having in the room.
Absolutely.
But I'll never get access to that tape. And,
know.
you know, that's okay.
And that kills me. 'Cause I'm just like,
That's okay.
run the tape. Like, let me see what that and honestly, I would also want to talk to the person who's receiving it.
Yes.
Because they also then have their own interpretation of what they just heard in like the full-on like yap session. And so it's like, you know, after what they said, what do you think about it? I feel like that would be like so tea.
Right.
I wish. But I guess as HR, we got to behave.
Here's a version of that that I think you could ask. And that's if you had a really good friend that was thinking of joining the company, what would you tell them is great and what would you caution them on? I think that framing of it, because it's hypothetical, allows for some version of an honest but an answer you could actually give in an exit interview.
Write that down, y'all. That is a fantastic question. I will be using that at our company. So thank you. Well, speaking of exit interviews and the questions, what do you think they can reveal about leadership, management styles, or culture that maybe engagement surveys may miss? Because I completely hear you where you're like, there's a lot of partnership. This is like a feedback loop. But I do think each of those spaces serves a purpose. And so do you think there are certain nuances that we can maybe miss because it's in an engagement survey, but we can pick that up because it's an exit instead?
Yes.
Okay.
I love an engagement survey.
Don't we all, girl?
We love it. We love it. I get so nerdy after we run our engagement surveys. I'll talk about it with anyone who will listen.
Yeah, honestly, same here.
The running joke in our company. But I think engagement surveys will tell you sentiment on a certain item, but they don't tell you how much that sentiment matters as it connects to happiness and retention. So, for example, one of the items on our survey is my manager has talked to me about my growth in the last 6 months. And I would probably rate that as neutral because I'm a chief people officer. I love being a chief people officer. And like, that's what I want to do. I'm not really concerned with my growth. I'm working for an incredible company, doing a really fun job in an amazing culture. For me, this is like the peak of what I want. And so my future growth is not really of concern to me. My manager, our CEO, knows that. And I would much rather use our time to talk about his feedback for me and his insights on how I can do my job even better to help us achieve our goals. And that is how we spend our time. So on an engagement survey, I'd probably rate that as neutral. And the engagement survey data will say that, let's say we have a neutral rating on talking about growth and development. But what it doesn't tell you is how much does that matter to people? Is it a driver of happiness or not? How does that change at each level, right? And that is what you get from individual conversations is, yeah, this is just a fact, but is it important, right? And we try to ask the questions that we think are going to be most important to the most amount of people in terms of what does motivate people and make sure they're happy and fulfilled at work. But everyone's different. You have a room of 100 people. Different people care about different things. And so it'll tell you what's the sentiment, but not, is that sentiment necessarily bad? Even work-life balance questions, right? Some might rate that low. I don't have great work-life balance right now in a major sprint, but like my career goal for this 3-year phase of my career was actually to work for like the fastest growing company in the space. So that's not a priority for me right now. Now, that's probably not most people. I would say on the whole, work-life balance is important to most. So that's why we ask. But I think that's where the digging deeper in a exit interview gets you a nice supplement to what is in a survey. And if I can tell you one thing I really like.
Please.
That is an offshoot. It's a little outside of the realm of exit interviews, but let's talk about, a stay interview.
What is that?
That's someone's not even close to giving notice.
Okay.
And you're a manager and you want to know what would drive you to stay here? What would keep you here for the next 3 years, 5 years? How would things need to go for that to happen, right? Now, a manager is going to get their engagement scores and they're going to see here's how the team feels on the whole across all of these items. But people are individuals. Everybody cares about something different. Somebody might be in a phase of career where they're just really happy to do a good job in the job they're in. The person sitting next to them might want to get 2 promotions in the next 3 years. Someone else might just want financial growth, and that's what their eye is on right now. Everyone is really different. So one exercise that we do at Grüns and I've used in past companies and I really like is a motivation exercise, right? And it's a card sorting exercise. So you have a deck of cards. It can be virtual or you can print the cards. Okay. And on those cards are all of these different things that people could be looking for at work. So work-life balance, work-life just flexibility, ownership and, agency over one's time, remote work, great health benefits, great parental leave, a raise, additional equity in the company, a promotion, going to a conference and presenting at it, getting the opportunity to speak, right? There's like all these different things. Someone saying thank you and recognizing you, right? Which is shocking. We'll get back to that in a minute. But anyway, you have this deck of cards and you have each manager sit down with each of their direct reports one-on-one, and the direct report sorts the cards. So the piles are not that important to me, somewhat important to me, and very important to me. Okay. So you start by just doing that sorting exercise. Then you go to the very important to me pile and you pull out your top 3 and you force rank them. And then you have a conversation about it. And I did this with my direct reports for the past 3 jobs. They all said totally different things that are like 95% in my power to give them without any approval or process or anything. Because what's interesting, and you learn this in exit interviews too, is yes, like money is great.
It's fab.
Money is great. But I have found out of all the exit interviews I've done over the course of my career, that is generally not the actual driving factor behind someone leaving. Sometimes it helped, but when you ask them, if we were to match this offer, would it change anything for you? And it's like, well, actually, no, because. And so what's interesting is there's all this, I think there's this perception that money and rewards solve
everything.
And a lot of people just want to be appreciated for great work, have agency over how they get their job done, be trusted, have access to information to make them successful, have high-performing coworkers alongside them. And like, these are the things that more than money cause people to, I think, stay or leave. So I consider the motivation card exercise and anything like it a stay interview, because you're looking at it through the positive lens of what would make you stay.
Yeah, no, I love that. So stay interviews, this is new for me. So how often do you do them? Like, is it every time a performance review ends? Do you want to make sure it stays away from the performance review cycle? Like, how do you determine the frequency?
I think once a year with your direct reports is plenty to have a conversation like that, hoping that you have a really good relationship outside, and in your one-on-ones, people can kind of bring up whatever is on their mind. But you know how a one-on-one goes. Sometimes it gets really tactical. You're talking about your to-do list and what the blockers are. And so to take a step back and say, like, this half hour is purely dedicated to like this conversation brings out a whole new set of things that, as close as you are to that person, might never come up without being given the open space to dedicate to it. And people love that exercise on both sides. So I think once a year is plenty. I don't even think it matters when you do it, just that you do it. Mm-hmm. And I probably would, if given a choice, I probably would decouple it with a performance conversation, because it's really just about getting to know someone on a deeper level and managing them in the way that works for them and being in tune with the things that are important. I have an amazing person who works alongside me now, and one of her top motivators is solving difficult problems that help the team, right? Like, amazing. I'm like, knowing that and knowing that it motivates you to get through something tough when you know the positive impact, I always go out of my way to say, hey, this piece of work that you did, this is what happened with it next. And like, this is why I think it was meaningful. It takes me nothing to do that. That's not a $10,000 raise. That's just taking that extra step to deliver context that this person will find meaningful. And maybe the person next to them who leads recruiting on my team cares about a totally different set of things. And it just allows me to be in tune with that.
Yeah. So do you think it's the right move to, knowing that the preference is maybe decoupling it from the review season, to use the top 3 cards to almost like inform what maybe we can work towards as a goal? Or should we just leave it independently outside of that and just have it as a tool of just knowing like, hey, this is what my direct likes, or this is what I like if I'm doing the exercise with my own manager, and we don't need to formalize it and put it into any corporate structure of performance feedback or whatever? Or do you think otherwise?
I kind of like it as its own pure thing. And especially because the goal, of course, if someone says like, I value getting a raise, that doesn't mean you're going to give that person a raise and someone else not the raise because it wasn't important to them. But it probably means when they get their raise, you're going to know that that's a really big deal to them and that's what they were working towards. And you can make a really big deal out of that and celebrate it, right? And know it's important. Whereas for someone else, we're going to give a raise if it's fair and earned and rewarding high performance and all of those things. And we're going to be fair and consistent about that. But for the person I had just told you about, I'm sure she would be thrilled to get a raise, but she finds meaning in other things. So I would know that I would just be delivering that because it is earned. And that's actually not going to carry as much weight as me saying thank you and showing the impact of her work. So it doesn't change the behavior of like, no one's going to get more money because they said they wanted more money, hopefully.
If only.
Hopefully. That's a topic for a whole other recording. But it will, I think some people deliver a raise and they're like, you should be happy. That should be motivating to you. That should solve all the things. But if it's not on their top motivators, they deserve it anyway. But you have to pay attention to the things that are going to be meaningful to them.
That makes perfect sense because then you're missing the mark. You're like constantly throwing something against the wall thinking it's going to work and then it's not. And then you're confused as to why you're sitting across the screen or across the room then doing the exit interview. And you're like, I had no idea. And the person's like, well, I technically was never asked. So.
Right.
Super smart. Well, look, if there's one takeaway from today, it's this. Exit interviews aren't just about closure for the employee. They're a mirror for the organization, whether it's in a stay interview or exit overall. And when done well, they can surface truths, highlight patterns, and create real opportunities for improvement long after someone has left the building. But to our guest's point, we're hoping we can do that before that even happens. So if today's conversation sparked a question or a reflection or maybe even rethink of how you approach exit interviews for your team, we'd love to hear from you. And you can do that by reaching out to us at peopleperson@morningbrew.com. And that information is also linked in the show notes. Thanks again, y'all, for listening to People Person. Jaime, as always, thank you for existing and being here. And look, y'all, we'll see you next time.